please use that. We thank you for joining us. We've got the next month's presentation lined up, and that is actually with Ben. So I will let him say a few things about what that topic is, and then he will introduce Cheryl for us, who will be presenting.
Alrighty, thank you, Lauren. Again, welcome everyone to the Research Pays Off for this month. Again, this is a monthly thing we do, the third week of the month, and third Tuesday that is. And today we were lucky enough to have Cheryl Richter from FHWA. She works at the Turner-Fairbank Research Center. She's going to talk a little bit about the Turner-Fairbank Research Center and what all they do. And a part of what they do is kind of get into our next month's talk is when I start. Steve Hendricks and myself will be talking about the online system we use for test section tracking at Minroad. Again, that also does InfoPay. I kind of need to work on the title with Lauren a little bit. But InfoPay was actually developed, Turner-Fairbanks. They developed the initial system a few years ago. They're using it for their long-term pavement LTPB. And so you may be talking about that today, but that's something that we utilize, that structure of that for our test sections we have at Minroad and using that to share data online. So with that, let me introduce Cheryl. And Cheryl and I have known each other for a number of years. I won't say how many, but again, she is the director of the Office of Infrastructure Research and Development at the Turner-Fairbank Research Center. And she's got a lot on her plate there where she's working on a lot of things with materials design and construction and asset management for highways and pavements, bridges, and other structures. She has a lot of different things with technical experts working in different areas. It's kind of like the Maplewood Lab of the nation out in DC. So with that, I guess we'll keep that introduction short. Cheryl, thanks again for presenting today and looking forward to the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ben. It's my pleasure to be here. And yes, we probably don't want to talk about how long we've known each other, Ben. I'm going to apologize. PowerPoint is not cooperating today, so you may be seeing other than the slideshow view that I've told it to display. It is what it is, so we'll just work with it. Okay. So as Ben has said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Turner-Fairbank Highway Research Center, TFHRC, and give you some background on our research facility for those of you who have not had the opportunity to visit us. And then I'll talk in a little bit more detail about a couple of, well, 4 of our selected pavement R&D research efforts. So starting with Turner-Fairbank. Turner-Fairbank is the Federal Highway Administration's research facility. We're located in McLean, Virginia, just off the George Washington Memorial Parkway for those of you who are familiar with the area. We have working at Turner-Fairbank about 95 federal staff members along with about 200 other folks. Some of them are on-site contractor support staff, or many of them are. We also have National Research Council fellows and other visiting researchers who work with us and are very actively engaged in our research. We conduct laboratory research in safety, operations, and infrastructure areas. We have a total of 15 labs at Turner-Fairbank and an annual budget of about $70 million. So I'll just give you a brief overview of some of the infrastructure labs we have at Turner-Fairbank. We have a structures lab that is capable of testing full-scale bridge components. What photo on the left-hand side of the photo, we have some ultra high performance girders that are being tested. Of particular interest in Minnesota, the test frame on the right side of the photo, this concrete structure, was actually used in the testing that followed up on the I-35W bridge collapse in research that we did to develop better guidelines for design and evaluation of gusset plates. Okay, we also have a very modern hydraulics laboratory equipped with a multifunction flume, as well as a smaller, which is what you see here, as well as a smaller force balance flume, where we do a substantial amount of research looking at the interaction of highway infrastructure with water. One thing to note about our hydraulics research is that we've transitioned from doing 100% of our hydraulics research using physical tests, scale models built in the flume and tested, to doing probably 70 to 80% of it using numerical simulation that we then validate through a limited number of physical tests in the flume. Our non-destructive evaluation laboratory conducts research to evaluate various NDE technologies and also works to develop improved NDE technologies and techniques for visualizing NDE data. Historically, the bulk of the work done in our on-site NDE laboratory has been devoted to technologies mostly applicable to bridges and structures. We've slowly been, the pavement engineers among us have been slowly working on our NDE engineer to focus a little bit more on NDE applicable to pavements as well. And I say that somewhat in jest, although there's truth to it as well. We have a full suite of materials laboratories for testing concrete. A photo of our concrete lab is shown there on the left. On the right are some photos from our chemistry lab. I speak to you as a pavement engineer by training who survived freshman chemistry. I can't say that I enjoyed it, but I've come to believe that many of the materials issues that we face in our pavements have their fundamental basis in chemistry. And I therefore consider our chemistry laboratory to be one of our more important facilities. Additional materials laboratories, of course, we have an aggregate and petrography laboratory that we use to assess quite often work that we do in forensic evaluations, and also, of course, a fully equipped asphalt binder and mixture laboratory. Our pavement testing facility has the capability to test full-scale pavement test sections. Unlike the Minroad facility, our test sections are side by side. The accelerated loading facility that you see in the background of this photograph is on the verge of being replaced. It and its companion that has already been removed from the site are about 30, 35 years old. Worn out and obsolete. So next week, we are expecting to take delivery of 2 new pavement testing machines, and I'll talk more about that toward the end of my presentation. Okay, we also have a geotechnical laboratory with both indoor and outdoor facilities. The photograph on the right is an instrumented GRS IBS foundation that we have instrumented to explore and study the long-term settlement of those foundation elements. As you may be aware, GRS, or geosynthetic reinforced soil integrated bridge systems, is a technology that has been heavily promoted through FHWA's Everyday Counts initiative as a relatively low-cost method of constructing bridge foundations. Okay, we also have a coatings and corrosions laboratory where we look at both technologies to improve the durability of metal in our highway structures and also assess corrosion issues. One of our recent major studies in that area was looking at chloride contaminated grouts and the anticipated rate of increase in the rate of corrosion that might be expected to occur as a result of that. Okay, now I'm going to turn to, a couple of our recent and ongoing research projects. And the first one I'm going to speak about is our work related to alkali silica reactivity in concrete. And I chose this particular project to speak about for a couple of reasons. One is that, to be honest, I'm pretty proud of what we've accomplished. The other is because I think it illustrates an important point when it comes to research. We live in a world where everyone wants things faster and faster and faster and faster. And, you know, we've become accustomed to a new iPhone coming out every year. Technology changes at a very rapid rate. But some problems don't lend themselves to rapid solutions. You may be wondering why I've got a photograph of an asphalt pavement in a slide where we're talking about a concrete distress mechanism. That's not an asphalt pavement. That's a long and winding road representing the path to the accomplishment that I'm going to speak to. Going back to 2010, a decade ago, the staff in our chemistry lab, led by Terry Arnold with Paco Munaz and Chen the Belacondran, who are contract support staff, began working to really understand the science of alkali silica reactivity. And for those of you who may not be familiar with that term, I'll explain what it is in a few moments. Now, this was something of a back burner project, but nevertheless, even, you know, it took them 7 years to really understand the science. Another year to develop a solution. A year after that to evaluate the solution and make sure it stood the test of time, if you will. And this past spring, we submitted a proposed standard test method for alkali silica reactivity propensity of coarse aggregates to AASHTO for possible adoption. And we're looking to extend that to fine aggregate. Now, alkali silica reactivity is a particularly vexing source of deterioration in Portland cement concrete. It can lie dormant for many years and then rear its ugly head and result in billions and billions of dollars worth of damage, not only to highway structures, but to any concrete infrastructure. So, the classical understanding of alkali silica reactivity. In this slide, the orange represents an aggregate particle, and the blue represents the alkalis that are present in some Portland cements. The classic understanding of ASR is that the alkali in the cement reacts with the silica that may be present in some aggregates and forms a gel that's represented by the red. If the gel stays dry, nothing bad happens. But when the gel absorbs water, it expands, causing the concrete to crack. So that's the classic understanding of ASR that I learned about many, many years ago as a student in a college materials class. Okay, the improved understanding of ASR development that our chemists developed or arrived at is that there are really two cases for ASR. There's one case where the pore solution, the liquid within the concrete, if you will, is high in silica and low in calcium and aluminum. And in that case, as with the classic case, gel forms, gel absorbs water, and the concrete cracks. The second case occurs when the pore solution is low in silica, high in calcium and aluminum. And in that case, even when the gel forms, no water is absorbed, therefore there's no expansion, and there are no ASR-induced cracks. And this enhanced understanding of the mechanism helps to explain why the tests that we've historically used to assess aggregates for their susceptibility to ASR have been less than 100% reliable. Okay, so with that understanding, our chemistry folks developed a test that is quite simple. To run the test, you need the mill report for the cement, you need to know the mix design, and you need 5 grams of aggregate. And the photo or the image here illustrates those 5 grams of aggregate. You put the aggregate in a Teflon tube with a solution of sodium hydroxide and some calcium hydroxide, and wait 3 weeks and test the resulting solution, and you get an answer that can be correlated to the susceptibility of the aggregate to form ASR. So, unlike the existing test methods or the test methods that are currently on the books, it's fast, as 21 days as opposed to a year or more. To date, there has been 100% agreement with field tests. Now, there's an asterisk after that with one qualifier. There is one case where we didn't get agreement with field test results with just the coarse aggregate, but when we went back and tested the combination of the coarse and fine aggregate, we did get 100% agreement. And this test method can ultimately, unlike current test methods, be applied to the job mix formula. So the coarse aggregate test method, as I mentioned, has been submitted to AASHTO for possible consideration or possible adoption. We have evaluation of the extension to fine aggregate ongoing. We don't expect the results to be different, but we want to be sure. Last November, we conducted a workshop at Turner-Fairbank for a number of state highway agency personnel. I hope some of them were from Minnesota, but I don't remember that as fact, to teach them how to do the test. And we've also provided some webinars on the test method. Quite frankly, if you'll forgive me for bragging, it's an accomplishment that I'm pretty proud of, because it's a real game changer for Portland cement concrete, not just for highways, but throughout the infrastructure community overall. So, in the interest of being fair, the next topic I'm going to talk about are test methods for asphalt mixtures. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, over the last 30 years since the advent of SuperPave, as asphalt suppliers have come up with new ways to meet the original SuperPave specifications, we found that test methods didn't necessarily ensure that we were getting durable materials. So there's been a proliferation of asphalt mixture tests to improve upon the original SuperPay specifications. And so in the last, I'm going to say year and a half, we've been working through a project to identify the strengths and limitations of the most common asphalt mixture performance tests. This work is led by David Mensching, our asphalt materials or asphalt mix and binder lab manager. To date, we've looked at the 6 test methods that are listed on this slide. And I'll just give you a moment to read through those. There are 3 phases in the project. The first phase has been largely completed, and I'll speak to the results in a moment. It's evaluation of the cracking and durability tests. The second phase is going to look at them again with the impact of long-term aging taken into consideration. And the third phase will look at state mixtures. The work that's been done to date has been founded on materials used in our soon-to-be completed pavement testing facility, accelerated loading testing, where we were looking at mixtures with different combinations of RAP, RAS, recycled asphalt pavement, recycled asphalt shingles, and different warm mix technologies. And this matrix here just shows the range of materials that were considered in the evaluation. Okay. So the findings in phase 1 have been that for the cracking tests, the mix rankings were generally consistent with performance. There was high variability in the Cantabro, NFlex, and iFit test results. The strongest correlations occur among the cyclic fatigue, ITC, and iFit tests. And in the judgment of our research team, the cyclic fatigue and ITC tests are the most promising from the standpoint of providing rankings that are consistent with performance, providing reasonable levels of variability, and providing the ability to differentiate different materials. Okay. Okay. So the future tests or future steps in this study, the phase 2 is ongoing. We're looking at aging loose mix at 95 degrees C and also at 135 degrees C. And for phase 3, we are interested in acquiring materials from states. If you're interested in providing some material to be considered, please contact David Mensching. Okay. The next topic I'm going to talk about, Ben has already given a little bit of a preview of, is the InfoPay web portal, which provides a gateway to pavement performance data. Now, it was originally developed to provide easy access to the data from the long-term pavement performance data. It's since been expanded to provide access to a wider array of pavement-related data, including some from MinRoad. And if I encourage anyone with an interest in pavement engineering to check it out. In addition to providing access to the data, it also provides access to all of the documentation, research reports, and products coming out of the long-term pavement performance program. Okay, so I mentioned that it's been expanded to include other data, MinRoad data, as I mentioned. As part of the transition to a performance-based approach to managing the federal aid highway program, FHWA did an interstate pavement sampling data collection effort where we collected data in a consistent fashion on a number, on several interstate highways crossing multiple states to compare to the state collected data to see what kind of consistency or variation we saw. We have in InfoPay now the data from the Canadian long-term pavement performance studies, data from the West Track work that was done, now about 20 years ago on performance-related specifications for asphalt, and also data from FHWA's historical rigid pavement performance and rehabilitation data. In January of this year, we released an additional module within InfoPay that we're calling InfoMaterials, which provides access to data from some of FHWA's materials research efforts. That includes work done through the Asphalt Research Consortium, which was funded under our previous authorizing legislation, Safety Lou, as well as data from our performance-related specifications research and data from the Mobile Concrete Technology Center, sometimes known as the Mobile Concrete Lab, which visits state project sites and does testing in parallel with state testing as a means of technology transfer. We're continually working to improve and expand InfoPay with some additional development expected in January 2021 and beyond. We'll continue to provide access to the data that I've mentioned already, but also add to that data from the ongoing work in our materials research, such as that comparing the asphalt mixture performance tests, adding data from the Mobile Asphalt Technology Center, some of our traffic speed deflection testing data, and so forth. So it will continue to expand as a resource for people interested in doing pavement research using data that we've collected through a variety of mechanisms. Okay. Related to InfoPay, now the pavement performance data collected through the long-term pavement performance program is a tremendous resource. Over the last 30 years, we've documented the performance of about 2,500 pavement test sections across the United States and Canada. And that's a resource that, we've taken advantage of to some degree, but we haven't fully tapped it. About 20 years ago now, we developed a strategic plan for LTPB data analysis. It's been updated a couple of times, but the last update was now 6 or 8 years ago, I think. And I meant to check that and forgot, I'll be honest. And so it's overdue for an update. And actually, Ben has been working with us on planning a workshop to bring about that update. One of the things we're hoping to achieve in updating our LTPB data analysis plan is to, number one, bring it up to date, if you will, so that it's focused on the most pressing needs today, which may be different than the most pressing needs were a decade ago. So We had originally intended to have an in-person workshop this fall. With the development of COVID-19, that's obviously not a really good plan. So we're moving it into a virtual environment. Looking forward to having an array of stakeholders assist us in updating the plan to meet the needs that are most pressing of the most pressing needs of the state DOTs today. And Larry Weiser is our lead on that effort. Okay, I mentioned earlier that we are soon to take delivery of new pavement testing machines for our pavement testing facilities. The old one is shown on the left. The new one under fabrication is shown on the right. We're very much looking forward to that happening next week. Along with that, we are doing a major update of our overall pavement testing facility. Earlier this summer, we completed construction of a new building that houses the control systems and supports the pavement testing facility. And we are also looking to, over the next couple of years, rebuild the test lanes in our pavement testing facility to accommodate a variety of needs. One of the things we're planning to do is to put in some barrier walls between each section of three or either, well, in most cases, 3 lanes. The last 2 lanes will be only 2, to give us the capability to flood the lanes so that we can explore the impact of moisture on our pavement foundation materials in a controlled manner. And we're looking to be able to do a wide array of both geotechnical and materials testing using this updated facility. Okay, so our research objectives for the updated pavement testing facility are to be able to use it to evaluate design methodologies, to look at resilient pavement structures and systems, as we have in the past, apply it to evaluating asphalt mix design standards and test methods, look at testing some concrete pavements where there are appropriate needs, do research to provide refined guidance concerning contaminated bases, and provide capability for both longer term and shorter term experimental programs at the facility. And to the extent that I just share the disclaimer that to the extent that I've used specific product names or trademarks in the presentation, that's not an endorsement, they were just necessary. And that concludes the formal part of my presentation, and I will look to the Q&A section to answer any questions and stop sharing my screen. Okay.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. There was a question from Leif at 10:27. Do you see it there? I can read it to you if you'd like.
Go ahead and read it because I'm still navigating.
Okay, so Leif wrote, does ASR test job mix compatibility, including establishing the impact on SCM's ability to mitigate ASR?
The next phase of our work in this area, Leif, is to look at mitigation steps using supplementary cementitious materials or possibly other mechanisms to mitigate. So yes, that's kind of work that's done focused on coarse aggregate. Current work is focused on fine aggregate and moving into mitigation strategies.
All right, so if you have questions, type them in the chat box. I don't see any right now. Cheryl, you did a wonderful job covering a lot of different topics. I guess a lot of things that you're touched upon, MRRA, different states. We have 10 states and over 60 different associate members that are working on the same topic. So it's nice to see the continuity, put it that way. I guess related to your performance tests and stuff, like how much for samples and things like that? Are you looking for samples of roads that are cracked and roads that are non-cracked and things like that, or do you know the details?
I would have to refer you to David to know exactly what he has in mind there. I certainly think he needs to have both the availability of the materials and some knowledge of the performance in the field, but I'm not quite sure what his planned methods are there.
And I guess related to your accelerated pavement testing facility, how are you coming up with the different types of sections that you're going to be designing in the upcoming years? Is there a technical advisory panel, or how does that work?
To date, it's been a large. Well, there was a small workshop with some invited participants that discussed possibilities and design ideas. It's been largely the basic design has been largely an internal FHWA discussion, but when it comes down to the specific experiments to be provided for in the initial work, there will be some stakeholder outreach for that.
Yeah, I could see there's always the question of accelerated pavement testing versus what we're doing at Min Road versus, true life pavements too. So there's those three characteristics that tie. It'd be great to work toward that. Yeah.
One of the criteria that I stress in all of our work, and I'll acknowledge that sometimes we violate it to some degree, is that we need to be focusing our work on national needs that if we don't do it, won't get done. So that's a key criteria in deciding what we're going to do.
Okay, well, it seems like people are letting you off a little easy today, which is not a bad thing. Lauren, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, Tom asked a question about why there are more consultants than permanent employees.
That's an artifact of the way the FHWA budget is established. Without getting too far into the weeds, our budget comes in two parts. We have what's known as a GOE budget, general operating expense budget, which pays staff salaries, which is quite limited. And then there's our research budget, which is also limited, but less, we have more flexibility. So we can use some of our research budget to pay for on-site contract support to supplement our federal staff, but it's a function of how Congress gives us our budget is what it comes down to. And part of the philosophy there, if you will, and I will not comment on whether this is fact or philosophy. There's a lot more flexibility, or there is a presumption that contract staff are more flexible than federal staff in terms of adjustments in terms of both numbers and expertise. a contract lasts for typically at most 5 years, at which point you can change out the type, the expertise you're buying, whereas government employees oftentimes are with us for 30 or sometimes as much as 40 years. But it's just a matter of how our budget is structured.
Okay. I did get one more question in the chat. You mentioned corrosion investigation for structures. Is there any research being done on corrosion of metal piles in soils?
Actually, we do have a project going on looking at corrosion of metal foundation elements. The staff person responsible for that is Jennifer Nix. And if anyone wants to follow up with me for details on things like that, shoot me an email and I'll put you in touch with the right person. One of the good thing about my current job is I get to know a little bit about a lot of things, and the bad thing about my current job is I know precious little about a lot of things.
Well, great. Well, that's all of the extra questions that I see. Ben, anything else?
No, I think that's it. Again, thanks, Cheryl, for sharing what's going on at the Ohio Research Center. And it was great to hear that. Again, thanks for your support with NRA. I know your concrete and asphalt trailers have come over for our workshops and things like that. We missed them this year, but we had them other years, so that was great too. So thanks for everything you do, and thanks for everything your staff does. And I guess this concludes our Research Pays Off for the month. I'll hope to see you again next month, where I'll be talking a little bit about the InfoPay system and how we're using that for Minroad.
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity. Stay safe and well, everybody.